Welcome back to Cyberspace. I'm your host, Leslie Poston, and today we're digging into a topic that touches many of us, yet often remains shrouded in whispers and closed-door conversations: toxic workplaces. What exactly makes a workplace toxic? It's not just about having a bad day or a tough week at work. It's about a consistent pattern of behaviors and practices that undermine your dignity and your well-being. This episode is about understanding, surviving, and transforming these environments. Toxicity in the workplace can manifest in various forms, from the subtle to the overt. Whether it's through micromanagement, harassment, or discriminatory policies, these behaviors contribute to a work environment that is not only unhealthy but potentially harmful. The constant exposure to negative behaviors such as bullying, gossip, and manipulation can erode your sense of self-worth and professional confidence. Studies consistently show these environments lead to increased stress, anxiety, and depression. Let's explore how to recognize these signs early and take action to protect your mental health. Toxic workplaces are characterized by an underlying culture of negativity that permeates every aspect of work life. From how decisions are made to how people communicate, the environment is filled with hostility and competition, rather than collaboration and support. The defining characteristics often include abuse of power, lack of transparency, an insistence on presenteeism, over-influence on hierarchy over substance, and a culture that prioritizes results over people. The impact of chronic stress in toxic work environments can't be overstated. When people feel undervalued, overworked, and unsupported, the stress becomes debilitating, affecting not only job performance but also overall health. Recent research from the American Psychological Association links toxic workplaces to increased risks of heart disease, compromised immune function, and severe mental health issues. We're seeing mounting evidence that the effects can persist long after leaving the toxic work environment, similar to other forms of trauma. Leadership plays a pivotal role in either fostering or mitigating workplace toxicity. Leaders who exhibit narcissistic tendencies, practice favoritism, or maintain a culture of fear directly contribute to workplace toxicity. In contrast, effective leaders demonstrate emotional intelligence, promote psychological safety, and create clear channels for feedback and communication. They understand that their behavior sets the tone for the entire organization and actively work to build trust and transparency. We talked a bit about what we mean by psychological safety in Season 1, Episode 18, if you'd like to know more. What's particularly concerning is how toxic leadership styles can cascade through an organization. When senior leaders model toxic behaviors, middle managers often feel pressured to adopt similar approaches, creating a downward spiral that affects every level of the organization. This ripple effect can transform even previously healthy teams into stressed, dysfunctional units struggling to maintain their performance and well-being. Toxicity seeps into organizations at various levels, each with its own distinct patterns and impacts. At the coworker level, toxic behaviors manifest through subtle undermining, credit stealing, and the spread of malicious gossip. These peer-to-peer dynamics create an atmosphere of mistrust where collaboration becomes nearly impossible. Competition exceeds healthy limits, leading to sabotage and constant one-upmanship that damages team cohesion and productivity. When toxicity stems from management, it often takes the form of micromanagement, public criticism, and arbitrary demands. Managers in toxic environments frequently move goalposts, play favorites, and use their position to create unnecessary pressure. They might withhold important information, take credit for their team's work, or create an environment where employees feel constantly surveilled and criticized. This type of toxicity is particularly damaging because managers control so many aspects of an employee's work life, from assignments and resources to performance evaluations and career advancement opportunities. At the executive level, toxic leadership manifests through systemic issues that affect entire departments, or organizations. These leaders often implement unrealistic performance metrics, encourage unhealthy competition between teams, and make decisions that prioritize short-term profits over long-term sustainability or employee well-being. They may create structures that reward unethical behavior or turn a blind eye to misconduct from top performers. The impact of executive-level toxicity is far-reaching, as it often becomes embedded in company policies, procedures, and cultural norms. The board of directors can either perpetuate or combat organizational toxicity through their oversight and governance decisions. Boards that focus solely on financial metrics while ignoring employee turnover, workplace culture, and ethical concerns contribute to a toxic environment. When boards fail to hold executives accountable for maintaining a healthy workplace culture, they essentially give permission for toxic behavior to continue. On the flip side, boards that mandate regular culture audits, establish ethics committees, and actively monitor workplace health indicators can be a powerful force for positive change. Discrimination adds layers of complexity to workplace toxicity, creating environments where certain groups face additional barriers and stressors. Sexism manifests in both overt and subtle ways. Women often receive lower pay for equivalent work, face higher standards for promotion, receive personality feedback that men simply don't receive, encounter death by 1,000 paper cuts through microaggression. These might include being interrupted more frequently in meetings, having their ideas attributed to male colleagues, or being expected to handle office housework like organizing celebrations or taking notes. The impact of gender-based discrimination goes beyond individual experiences. It creates systemic barriers that affect everything, hiring and promotion decisions to daily workplace interaction. Women in leadership positions often face what we call the double bind. They're criticized for being too aggressive when they display traditionally masculine leadership traits, but viewed as too soft or emotional when they don't. This creates an almost impossible standard to navigate. Racism in the workplace operates through both individual and systemic mechanisms. Employees from marginalized or othered groups frequently experience exclusion from important informal networks, face higher scrutiny of their work, and navigate stereotypes that affect their perceived competence and leadership potential. Even in organizations with strong diversity statements, subtle forms of racism persist through biased performance evaluation, inequitable assignment of high-visibility projects, and assumptions about cultural fit. The impact of racial discrimination is particularly insidious because it often operates through what scholars call second-generation discrimination, practices that appear neutral on their face but disproportionately affect certain racial or ethnic groups. This might include things like informal mentoring networks that exclude Black, Latina, and Indigenous employees, or cultural expectations that favor certain communication styles over others. Disability discrimination creates physical and attitudinal barriers that limit full workplace participation. Organizations often fail to provide adequate accommodation, viewing them as burdens rather than investments in talent. Employees with disabilities frequently face skepticism about their capabilities, exclusion from social activities, and assumptions about their career aspirations. The intersection of disability with other forms of discrimination can create particularly challenging situations for affected employees. The data clearly demonstrates the cost of these discriminatory practices. Research shows that companies in the top quartile for gender diversity, for example, are as much as 34% more likely to have above-average profitability. Similar patterns emerge for racial and ethnic diversity. Yet despite this evidence, discrimination persists, often protected by organizational structures that resist change and leadership that lacks understanding of the issue's impact. The complexity of addressing discrimination in the workplace requires a multifaceted approach. Organizations must implement clear policies with real consequences for discriminatory behavior. provide comprehensive training that goes beyond compliance to address subtle forms of bias, and create accountability measures that track progress on diversity and inclusion metrics. What's particularly challenging about addressing discrimination is how it intersects with other forms of workplace toxicity. When discrimination combines with toxic leadership or systemic organizational issues, it creates particularly hostile environments for marginalized groups. This intersection requires special attention in any efforts to address workplace toxicity. Another challenging impacting our American listeners is the attack on the workforce programs designed to help combat this toxicity and provide trainings by the current government in the United States. Savvy companies know it's not smart to end these programs, and they will find a path to keep moving forward. Survival in a toxic workplace demands a combination of practical strategies and emotional resilience. The first step involves recognizing the signs of toxicity in your environment. These might include chronic stress, anxiety about going to work, feeling isolated or targeted, or witnessing consistent unethical behavior. Pay attention to physical symptoms too. Headaches, sleep disruption, or changes in appetite often signal workplace stress long before you know that it's happening. These symptoms aren't just in your head. The physiological impact of working in a toxic environment is real and well documented. Your body's stress response system wasn't designed to handle constant activation, and prolonged exposure to toxic work environments can lead to serious health consequences. Once you've identified the toxic elements, establish strong boundaries. This means learning to say no to unreasonable demands, maintaining clear documentation of all interactions and incidents, and creating separation between work and personal life. Use email rather than verbal communication for important matters, and keep copies of all documentation in a personal, secure location. Follow up on verbal communications with an email wrap-up of what was just discussed. To make sure this tactic works, I'm recommending Amal Masri's Never Go to a Second Location framework. In the case of toxic workplaces, a second location is any power shift that gives the workplace manipulator more control. An emotional second location where they make it about your reaction instead of their actions. A physical or communication channel, the second location that moves the conversation to a location that benefits them and isolates you. Or a logical second location where they try to reframe the discussion so the real issue gets buried. Do your best to keep the power dynamic where you have leverage, transparency, and control. I'll be sure to put Amal's LinkedIn in the show notes for you. On top of all of this, you also need to build a support network. This includes both internal allies who can validate your experiences and provide strategic advice, and external supporters who offer perspective and emotional support. Consider working with a therapist who specializes in workplace issues. They can provide valuable tools for managing stress and maintaining your mental health. Developing specific coping strategies is vital for managing day-to-day stress in toxic environments. In addition to any self-care you may practice, like mindfulness or gratitude journaling, you must establish and maintain firm boundaries around your work hours and availability and your private hours and availability. This means learning to say no to those late-night emails and weekend work requests, so often characterize toxic environments. And remember, no is a full sentence. You don't need to explain. While these strategies can help you survive, it's more important to remember that survival shouldn't be your long-term goal. Sometimes the healthiest choice is to leave a toxic environment, especially if you've tried multiple strategies without improvement. Document everything before you go, as this information might be important for future reference or legal protection. Performance improvement plans have become a notorious tool in toxic workplaces, often wielded as a sophisticated form of workplace bullying. While PIPs should serve as a collaborative tool for professional development, toxic managers frequently use them to create paper trails for termination or to force resignations. These weaponized PIPs typically feature impossible standards, shifting goalposts, and vague metrics designed to ensure failure. The psychological impact of being placed on a PIP in a toxic environment is severe. Employees experience intense anxiety, loss of confidence, and feelings of isolation. The process can feel particularly devastating when the PIP follows a history of positive performance reviews or comes after speaking up about workplace issues. Many employees report feeling blindsided. What makes PIPs particularly insidious in toxic workplaces is their thin veneer of objectivity and fairness. They're often presented as a tool to help employees improve, but in reality, they can be used to create that paper trail that protects the organization from legal consequences while pushing out targeted employees. Navigating an unjust PIP requires strategic documentation and careful attention to detail. Keep records of all your meetings, emails, unsolicited compliments, or kudos from anyone in the organization, from clients, and keep your positive performance feedback. Save copies of these and any evidence of your achievements, including keeping a copy on your personal computer. Track how PIP goals might differ from standard departmental expectations or your original job description. If possible, request all feedback and instructions in writing. When you're facing an unjust PIP, build your support network immediately. One of your first calls should be to an employment lawyer who can help you understand your rights and document everything properly. Legal consultation early in the process can make a huge difference in protecting your interests. You'll also want to connect with industry mentors who understand the standards and expectations in your field. They can help you evaluate whether the PIP's requirements are reasonable or if they're being used as a tool for harassment. Professional coaches, if you can afford them, can be invaluable during this time, helping you maintain perspective and develop strategies for navigating the situation while protecting your mental health. If your HR department has shown themselves to be trustworthy, and I know that's a big if in many toxic workplaces, they could be another source of support and guidance. Finally, don't underestimate the value of connecting with colleagues who have successfully navigated similar situations. Their firsthand experience can provide practical insights and emotional support. Understanding the broader context of PIPs in your organization provides more valuable insight. Pay attention to patterns and how PIPs are used. Are they commonly implemented after employees raise concerns about workplace issues? Do they tend to target specific demographics or departments? This pattern recognition can help build a case if legal action becomes necessary, and can help you understand whether you're dealing with an isolated incident or a systemic issue. It's also important to recognize that while being put on a PIP can feel isolating, you're not alone in this experience. Many professionals have faced similar situations and successfully navigated them. Some have even used the experience as a catalyst for positive career changes, whether that means finding a healthier workplace or transitioning to a new field entirely. When it comes to reporting toxic behavior, strategic thinking and careful preparation are absolutely essential, especially in environments where traditional reporting channels may have been compromised. The first step is always through documentation. Record specific incidents with dates, times, witnesses, and any relevant communication. Build a clear pattern of behavior rather than focusing on isolated incidents. This helps establish the systemic nature of the problem. The challenge of choosing the right reporting channel can't be overstated. While internal reporting through HR or management might seem like a natural first step, external channels often provide better protection and more objective handling of your concerns. Industry regulatory bodies can be particularly effective when dealing with ethical violations or safety concerns. They have the authority to investigate and mandate changes. Professional associations also play a vital role, especially in cases where industry standards or professional ethics are being violated. They can provide guidance, support, and even sometimes mediation services. State and federal labor boards are another resource, particularly when dealing with discrimination, wage theft, or unsafe working conditions. They have the power to launch formal investigations and enforce compliance with labor laws. Legal authorities may need to be involved in cases of serious misconduct, harassment, or criminal behavior. And while it should generally be considered a last resort, media outlets can sometimes play a role in creating accountability, especially when other channels have failed to address systemic issues. However, this path requires careful consideration of potential personal and professional consequence. Let's talk about the psychological impact of reporting toxic behavior. It's something that affects almost everyone who's faced this situation. Many people find themselves wrestling with intense fear of retaliation. And then there's the deep seated concern about professional reputation or being known as a troublemaker. Perhaps most insidious is the creeping doubt about whether reporting will actually lead to any real change. And let's be honest, this doubt often comes from witnessing previous reports that were swept under the rug or resulted in superficial changes at best. Research from workplace psychology shows that this learned helplessness can be one of the most challenging barriers to overcome. Here's the thing, when organizations get reporting systems right, they establish crystal clear procedures that leave no room for ambiguity about how reports will be handled. They put robust protections in place for whistleblowers, making it explicitly clear that retaliation won't be tolerated. Most importantly, they demonstrate genuine follow through on complaints, showing the entire organization that speaking up leads to meaningful action. The most effective organizations take this even further. They implement multiple reporting channels, recognizing that different situations and comfort levels require different approaches. They provide regular training, not just on how to report issues, but on how to recognize problematic behaviors in the first place. They maintain transparent communication about how reports are handled, sharing as much information as they can while respecting confidentiality. Most critically, perhaps, they demonstrate through consistent action that reporting leads to meaningful change rather than retaliation. Let's get into the psychology behind why it's so challenging and what it takes to make real change stick. Organizations aren't just systems and processes, they're complex webs of human psychology, shared beliefs, and ingrained behaviors. This makes changing a toxic workplace so much harder than just implementing new policies or switching up the organizational chart. First, we need to understand organizational inertia, this powerful force that makes toxic cultures self-perpetuating. People in toxic workplaces often develop shared defense mechanisms. They might normalize inappropriate behavior, rationalize toxic leadership, or adapt their own behavior to survive. Over time, these adaptations become part of the organizational identity, making change feel not just difficult, but threatening to people's sense of how things should be. Here's where it gets really interesting. There's this phenomenon called collective fear of change that shows up in toxic workplaces. Even people who are suffering in the current environment might resist transformation because they've developed coping mechanisms that work for them. They know how to navigate the current toxicity, but change means stepping into uncertainty. This creates a paradox where people simultaneously want change and fear it. The psychological dynamics of power play a huge role as well. In toxic workplaces, power is often maintained through fear, control, and manipulation. When you start trying to transform these environments, you're not just changing processes, you're disrupting established power structures. This naturally creates resistance from those who benefit from the current system, even if that system is damaging to the organization as a whole. But here's the hopeful part. Understanding these psychological dynamics actually gives us a roadmap for creating lasting change. We know that people need to feel psychologically safe to embrace transformation. They need to believe that taking risks and speaking up won't result in punishment or humiliation. And this safety needs to be demonstrated consistently over time. It's not enough to just declare things are different now. Creating this sense of safety requires addressing both individual and collective trauma from the toxic environment. It's about acknowledging the pain and damage that's been done while also creating a vision of a healthier future that people can live in. This is deep emotional work that goes far beyond surface level change. What's particularly fascinating is how change starts to accelerate once you reach a critical mass of people who believe transformation is possible. In psychology, we call this a tipping point, when enough people start modeling healthier behaviors and supporting positive change. It creates a new social norm that can rapidly reshape the entire organizational structure. The key is understanding that lasting transformation isn't about forcing change from the top down, it's about creating the psychological conditions where people feel safe enough to choose change for themselves. When people feel heard, valued, and supported, they naturally become agents of positive transformation in the workplace. When we look at organizations that successfully prevent toxic workplace cultures, we see several critical strategies working in concert. It all begins with comprehensive onboarding programs that do more than just cover policy and procedure. They deeply emphasize cultural values and set clear expectations for behavior at all levels. This foundation is reinforced through regular, meaningful training on ethical behavior and respectful communication. And I want to emphasize the word meaningful here. We're not talking about those check in the box online modules that everyone clicks through as fast as possible. We're talking about interactive, engaging sessions that address real workplace scenarios and challenge people to examine their own behaviors and biases. Another element is having clear, consistent consequences for toxic behavior. And this needs to apply equally to everyone, from entry-level employees to top performers and senior execs. Too often, we see organizations let toxic behavior slide when it comes from their rainmakers or senior leaders, which sends a devastating message to the rest of the workforce. Hand in hand with this goes the need for transparent promotion and compensation practices. When people understand how decisions are made and see the process as fair, it removes one of the major sources of workplace toxicity. Regular employee surveys are another vital tool, and this is important, only if they're followed by genuine action. We've seen too many organizations conduct surveys and then file away the results without making any real change. The most successful organizations take that feedback seriously and implement visible changes based on what they learn. They also invest heavily in leadership development programs that focus on emotional intelligence and people management skills, recognizing that technical expertise alone does not make someone a good leader. Perhaps more importantly, these organizations build strong diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, though they may have to call them something else now, that are truly integrated into their core business practices. This isn't about hitting numerical targets or making nice sounding statements. It's about creating genuine opportunities for all employees to thrive and continue their best work. Recent short sighted challenges to DEIA initiatives have shown us just how important it is to maintain our commitment to workplace health, even in the face of external pressure. Organizations that view diversity and inclusion as fundamental to their success rather than mere compliance requirements are better positioned to resist these pressures and maintain healthy workplace cultures. They understand that building an inclusive workplace isn't just about meeting quotas, it's about creating an environment where everyone can do their best work and contribute to the organization's success. Tackling toxic workplaces requires courage, persistence, and collective action. Whether you're surviving a toxic environment, working to create change, or building preventative measures, remember that you're not alone in this struggle. If you found value in the episode, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to our free Patreon to join the conversation. That's how we got the topic of the episode today, was from a listener. Let's support each other and transforming our workplaces for the better. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite streaming service so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for tuning in to Cyberspace. I'm your host, Leslie Poston, signing off. Until next time, keep your head on a swivel for toxic behavior at work and, above all, stay curious. One last thing, we're nominated for an award by the Women in Podcasting Network. If you love what we do, look for the link to vote for us in the show notes. Thanks for listening.